Now let's take a look at using vectors out in some code. And understand that what I'm going to show you here with vectors applies to all the other 6 containers and their subcontainers. But vector will just kind of whet your appetite and let you see what's going on here and the power of these things as opposed to just basic arrays. Okay, now I've created a project out there called Vector Example, and then I added a vexx page in here, and so you can find this in your work files folder, and yours is going to be more elegantly commented. Okay, in the one that's on there I've got a lot more comments. It could be slightly different than what I do here, depends on what I finally end up getting in there, but this is going to really help you get your head around how you can use these various containers. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, understand that to run these we're going to create functions up here. Okay, and then in our sub main here, or not sub main but our function main, I'm still stuck in the old basic days, guys. We're going to just call that example. Okay, so notice we'll just call example 1 down here, and then we'll just, when we run it, this will run and cause this code to run, and then we'll be done. All right, now notice what I've done here. When I created my project, I included IO streams so that I can send things out to the console. I included vector so we can actually use that vector, and then I'm using standard vector, and this is from the standard template library. Okay, so you'll have to include those up there. Well, the first thing let's do something very simple here. Let's create a vector. So we'll put the keyword vector, and then we just tell it, by the way, I want a vector of integers, and I want to call this VTC. All right, and that's pretty straightforward, right? And then I can start to do some really cool things with these. And the first thing I want to show you is, and you'll see a lot here about why these things are so cool, is how we can start to work with these vectors in a programmatic way, a lot more efficiently, and just a cooler, better way of living and working with these as opposed to arrays. So what I'm going to do here is create the example in a way that it makes sense to you, and we can read it when we start to output it to the console. Okay, and VTC contains, and so what I'm going to do here, this is the first thing, and this will open your eyes on vectors. Notice we created a vector here called VTC. So now I'm going to use the vector, and I type VTC, and when I hit the period, notice what comes up. We've got all these methods here: assign, at, back, begin, capacity, cend. We're going to use at, by the way, a little bit later on in some code. Erase, probably use that one. And then there's insert size, we'll use that one. So we'll play with a lot of these here. So we're going to call the size so that we can see how many elements are in that array. Okay, not the values, but just how many elements are out there. Okay, very simple example, not a lot going on here. We're just going to create a vector, and then we're going to look and see what size it is. Okay, now obviously there's not going to be any elements, but we'll take a look at this anyway. So I will build this, and then we will jump out there and take a look at it. Okay, and so what I will do is jump out here, and I'm going to show you here that well, let me clear this off and show you. Let me go back through this and make sure. To find what I just compiled, if I go into my documents and go into Visual Studio 2010, then into my projects, you will see the vector example. And if I look in the debug folder, that's where mine are going. There's my executable. So I just want to back up, hold down Shift, right click on that in Windows 7, and I get this open command window here. And now I can just type vector example, because that's where that executable is. Now notice, there's my output. Let's look at how we got that. There's my output right there. Example 1, VTC contains 0 elements, and this is where that came from. Okay, so the VTC size right here is showing us that there's 0 elements in there. All right, and so let's clear that off so we can come back to it later. Now let's take another look. Let's do it a little bit differently. Instead of just calling it straight up like that, let's do a second example. All right, and with this one we are going to take the same vector instantiation, and notice scope's going to take care of these for us. And this time, instead of creating it like that, we'll tell it to add 3 elements to it when it brings it up. Okay? And so now again, we're going to check the size of this. And I will do that right there. And I'm going to change this to example 2 so that we can see that we're looking at that. Okay? And let's see if there's anything else we want to do. Now let's stick with this for right now. And so I will compile that. We'll let that compile up, and then we will jump out to the console. We're still in the same place, and I will grab my old command. And notice VTC contains 0 elements, and you know what I did. Some of you guys are already screaming, hey, wait a minute. You're not calling your second example. Does that make sense here? In the main, I had to call this example to tell it to run that one. Okay, never mind if your instructor gets lost. Okay, I'll eventually catch up, I promise. Okay, so let's run there it is. Let's run vector example again. Notice example 1 tells us that the size is 0. Okay, but then with example 2, notice we instantiated it with 3 elements, and then when we ran our size right here on the second example, it now contains 3 elements. Now, keep in mind, don't let me confuse you here. These aren't the same. Okay, these are 2 separate vectors because we went out of scope between the 2 functions. Okay, so anyway, that's a good introduction. Now join me in part 2, and we'll do some other things with this vector. Welcome to Using a Vector part 2. And we're going to take off right where we ended in part 1. And we were working with our example 2. Now notice we created a vector of integers here, and we created it with 3 elements. We initialized it with 3 elements in our vector named VTC, and we just did a simple console out, and we saw the size. We used the size method of VTC, and we saw that there were 3 there. Now what if we want to actually add some values to this? Very easily done. VTC 0, these are 0-based arrays, okay, equals 45, if you want to think of them as arrays. And notice 2 are the second position, which is number 1. We'll set that one equal to 52. That'll be good. And then the third position, which is index number 2, we'll set that one equal to 77. Okay, that's all we have to do to assign the values. If we want to go back and reassign 1 to 56, we just say VTC1 equal 56 in the same format as that. Okay, I bumped the mouse, guys. Let me back up. So if we want to change the value of VTC1 here, we just set VTC1 equal to 56, and it'll go change it for us. Okay, no big deal. Now we can do some really cool things with these. The first thing is we can add the values of these together. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste this in so that you don't have to endure me typing it. Okay, but if I paste this in, notice I am going to create an integer called total VTC. Then I'm going to set it equal to, and notice here I'm just going to add these together. All right, then I'm just going to call a standard console out, and this will be part of example 2, by the way, and we'll see the total of the VTC element. Let's change that to say element values is, and then we'll just put it out there, and we'll just put our variable that we came up with. All right, so let's compile this. Take it just a second now, and then we will jump out to the location. Let me clear this so it looks a little cleaner. Pull it up here so we can see it, and there's our example. Notice in example 2 it contains 3 elements. Total of the elements is 174. And sure enough, if you get out your calculator and you add those 3 together, you will see right here that the total right here, total VTC, is 174. So there is our console out that is creating this line right here. Okay, now that's kind of cool. That gives us a little glimpse at adding that up, but there's another way to do that. Obviously, we've done it in previous videos, and that is we can just loop through this and loop through that vector and get those. And again, I'm going to copy this, and then we'll just kind of talk about it here. But let me paste this in. Well, let me copy it first. How about a nice copy and paste course? Would that be good? Maybe I could use that. Okay, so now I'm going to list my elements in VTC using a while loop. Now notice I am going to create a integer called I and set it equal to 0, just initialize it at 0. I'm going to create a integer called tot VTC and initialize it to 0. Okay, and then I'm going to put me a line output that says contents of the vector, and then I'm going to loop through and show them. Now notice what's happening here. While I, which is the index position that I'm going to be searching for in my vector, while it is less than, and notice I just pulled the size. Now I already know the size says that it's 3, okay? So while it's less than 3, so that will give me 0, 1, and 2, and then it'll stop. So I don't have to do the -1 thing because I'm using a while here. Then I am going to just out to the console put the value VTC I, VTC 0, VTC 1, VTC 2. All right. Then I will increment the value of I by 1, and then we'll loop through and check the value again. And as long as I am less than the size, which is 3, I should be good to go, and it should just list them out. Okay. Very simple example. We'll compile it one more time. Bring up our window. We'll call vector example, and there you go. Notice we've kind of expanded example 2 here, and I'm going to do some little housekeeping here. I'm going to bring this up to here and then bring my window back up so we can do some checking here. Okay, let me put this up here and then drag it back down. Okay, I had a memory display thing going there. Notice up here I added my 3 values in. Then when I came down here, I totaled them up, and that's what we got right here. Then when I got down here, I said, you know what, let's just loop through and grab those things. And that is exactly what we got. Notice our output here, contents of the VTC vector, came right here. Then our loop produced, and we've got an end line here, which kicked every one down to a new line. And remember the 45, 52, 77 we put in earlier? Well, there they are, right? Okay, pretty straightforward. All right, now pretty simple example here, but what I want to do in the next video, and this will be part 3 of using a vector, we're going to start to play with some other things. Okay, we're going to go back and we're going to insert a value to the end very efficiently, and then we'll actually look at how to look at a particular location in a vector, or we'll check the size. We'll do all kinds of things. Okay, so join me in part 3, and we'll go a little deeper with some of this vector functionality stuff. Welcome to part 3 of using a vector, and in this part I'm going to load up example 3 here and show you quite a few different things here, actually 3 or 4. The first thing I'm going to do, notice I've created an example 3, and then I will jump down here into my int main and put an example 3 so we can call it when we're done. All right, now let's go up here, and I'm just going to copy some things in first. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our code that created our integer vector, and notice it instantiated it with 3 elements. Okay, and then we're going to call this not example 4 but example 3. All right, and what we're going to do here is check the size of it. It should show us 3, and then we're going to come down here and loop through and see those. Okay, but then what I want to do is say, okay, what happens, how do I take one out? Well, I am going to do a VTC, notice, pop back. All right, and if I just do pop back, and then I go through and list the size of the elements again, or just list the elements again, and I'm going to go grab some code to do that and put it in here. A lot of lines of code here, but don't let that intimidate you. It's pretty straightforward, but I'm just doing very simple examples. So notice what I'm going to do right here. I am going to call pop back, and that is going to take the last one off, and then we're going to loop through it right here and see what it looks like. Okay, and so let's compile this. And so this is a way to take the end element off of the vector. All right, and so we'll jump out there and we will execute it. And then notice in example 3, the contents of the vector, and then we did pop back, okay? And then the contents of the vector after using pop back, notice 77 is gone, okay? And it is this pop back right here that took 77 off. It took off the last element in the vector, okay? Pretty straightforward. What if I want to put it back, okay? Well, all I've got to do to put it back is to use the push back. All right, and so let's do that. Let's just call a push back, and I'm just going to come down here, do VTC dot push back, and we had 77 in there, so we'll just put it back now. All right, and so we'll push back 77, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to run the same looping thing again. I could have called this out somewhere, but I'm just going to keep looping through it. Okay, and let's change this contents after using push back 77. Okay, and so let's compile this. So again, push back is just going to place a variable on the end, or place an element with a value in it on the end of the vector. Okay, let me pull this up, clear it off so it's a little easier for us to see. And so notice after pop back the 77 was gone, and then after using pushback 77 we put it right back. So pop back will remove one, pushback will put it right back there. Well, now let's take one more look at one more thing I want to show you before I run out of time here, and that is how to erase, for example, the second element. All right, and we're just going to continue this in example 3. Now your example is going to have this broken down into 5 examples, but I didn't want to spend all that amount of time here, and so I've kind of cut some stuff off for you, okay, to save you some time having to watch me do it. But you will see the full thing in your work files. So what I want to do is, notice I've got 45, 52, and 77 still in there. Okay, that's in the vector because we popped the 77 off and then we pushed it back. Okay, and so what I want to do now is, how can I remove just a certain element? Okay, well, notice I can call VTC dot, notice, erase. Okay, and then I'm going to do another trick here and call VTC begin, okay, +1. Now notice that statement that says, okay, I want to erase something, but I want you to go to the beginning, then I want you to add 1 to that. That would be the second value, would be index 1, right? So it should be the 52 right here. Okay, so we will run that, and then we are going to, guess what, loop through again. Not the most efficient code in the world, okay, but you'll get an idea of what's going on. Contents of VTC after using, I'll just copy this down here, after using this. Okay, and so we will compile this, and then we'll jump out here, clear it, run it again. Now notice, so here's our example 3. The contents were 45, 52, 77. We did a pop back, the 77 went away. We did a push back 77, put it back, and then we erased the second one, which was the beginning +1, and notice we took the middle one out, which was 52. All right, now this example right here, this erase and then begin, gives you a couple of more little hints of things that you can do here. Now these little examples are the things that you should really spend some time on. Make sure you burn these things into your brain, you get real comfortable at how these things work, and then expand it past vector and go out and play with the list and map and some of those other things. Okay, so we'll end it here with vector, but that's just a bunch of simple examples that you can use to work with the vector container.